second video introduction to the Tai Chi Code. In part one of the introduction, I introduced the three elements of the core: the upper torso, the lower torso, and the pelvis, and how rotation of those three elements create 8 specific combinations of core movement that can be used in Tai Chi. In this second part of the introduction, I'm going to use the yin and yang definitions of the 8 Tai Chi Trigrams to explain how there is a correlation between the 8 techniques of Tai Chi and the 8 unique possible core movement combinations of rotation. So let's start with the most recognizable move in Tai Chi, or technique in Tai Chi, which is ward-off. Ward-off is represented in the Tai Chi Trigrams by 3 solid yang lines. If we're applying that to our 3 elements of the core, that means I have yang energy in my hip joints, yang energy in my lower torso rotation, and yang energy in my upper torso rotation. Yang energy is offensive or attacking energy. And so how we can understand this with the hip joints is that extension of the hip is naturally a yang movement because it pushes my body off the ground in the direction of my opponent. Flexion of the hip, on the other hand, is yin energy. When I flex the hip, I am removing my body away from the opponent, or I am potentially turning my body away from the opponent, as if I was dodging something. So extension of the hip is yang, flexion of the hip is yin. That answers one of the 3 lines of the trigrams. The other 2 lines relate to the torso rotation. That is a little bit harder to define than the hips when we look at how to categorize rotation of the upper torso and the lower torso as yin or yang. But there is a logical explanation. If I turn my upper torso on the left towards the right side, it propels my left arm to the right. That in and of itself cannot be defined as yin or yang energy. But when I associate that rotation with an action of the hip joint, I can see that turning my upper torso to the right as I extend my right hip causes my energy in the arm to essentially reflect off of the extension of the hip and project outwards towards, again, my opponent. That is yang energy, as I'm turning in the direction of my extending hip, projecting my arm outwards. On the other hand, if I were to flex my right hip instead of extend it, what would happen is my left arm would turn into my flexing hip. As you can see, it does not project outwards as it did when my hip was extending. This is a much more retreating action or defensive action, and therefore we can use rotation of the upper torso towards the flexing hip. We can see that as a yin energy. So I have extension of the hip is yang, flexion of the hip is yin. Turning the upper torso towards the extending hip is yang. Turning the upper torso towards the flexing hip is yin. The same applies for the lower torso, although it's harder to see because I don't have arms extending off of my lower abdomen. But you can see it works in the same way as the upper torso. If I turn my belly button or my lower abdominal muscles towards my right leg as it's extending, it projects the whole body outwards. If, on the other hand, I turn my belly button to the other side, away from the extending hip, you see how my arm, my left arm, retracts away instead of expanding out. So rotation of the lower torso away from the extending hip is yin. rotation of the lower torso towards the extended hip is yang. So I now have a definition of yin and yang for the three elements of the core. Using those three elements and the definitions of yin and yang, I can now apply them to each of the 8 trigrams and then know which of the 8 core techniques relates to which of the 8 trigrams and which of the 8 fundamental techniques of Tai Chi. In this portion of the video, I'm going to go through the 8 specific Tai Chi fundamental techniques and their trigrams and explain how they are correlated with the 8 core techniques of the Tai Chi Code. I just explained ward off, which has 3 yang lines: extension of the hip, lower torso rotation towards the extended hip, and upper torso rotation towards the extended hip. That is ward off. Now, the opposite of ward off would be rollback. In rollback, I have 3 broken lines, or 3 yin energy lines. So, in that sense, I would have a flexing hip, and I would have the upper torso and the lower torso turning towards the flexing hip. I can best exemplify this in the move of grasp the sparrow's tail, where I perform ward off, and in ward off you can see I'm turning my right upper torso to the left, I'm turning my left upper torso toward the left, and I'm extending my left hip. That's projecting my right arm outwards in ward off. From here, there's a rotation of the body where I'm actually now turning my upper torso on the left to the right, and I've reversed the rotation of my lower torso to the right also. So I've transitioned from ward off to both energies of the upper torso and lower torso going in the opposite direction. And now I'm set up for rollback. I am now going to flex my right hip, and my upper torso and my lower torso are turning into that right hip. And it causes my body to sink or retreat backwards. Oftentimes, when rollback is explained, it appears that the body is turning to the left. But in fact, my torso is actually rotating to the right as it sinks down. The whole spine is moving to the left because my knee's extending, but I am not actually turning my body to the left, which would actually unroot my right leg. So this is rollback. 3 yin lines, upper torso and lower torso turning towards the flexing hip. Now, while I'm in the grasp the sparrow's tail position, what I'm going to do is set up another movement, which is press. Press is another one of the 4 techniques that we see during grasp the sparrow's tail. I do rollback, and then what I'm going to do is a motion where I sweep my left arm back and then circle my right arm so my palm of the left hand is connecting to the wrist of my right arm. That one motion here is actually 2 different techniques, which we'll refer to later, which are split and elbow strike, hidden within grasp the sparrow's tail. At this point, I execute press, where I'm pressing my left palm out towards the opponent and also against my right wrist. Press in the Tai Chi Trigrams is represented by a top line which is broken, which indicates yin energy. That top line is hip energy. The second line of the trigram is a solid line in press, which represents yang energy. In this sense, my upper torso is turning away from my flexing hip. My left hip is flexing, meaning I'm pulling my knee forward. That's would be hip flexion. My upper torso is turning away from it, making it yang. And the bottom line of the press trigram is broken, meaning yin. So my lower torso is turning towards the flexing hip, which also creates the root on the ground for my left heel. So in press, I shift the weight forward by pulling my knee forward, which is yin energy of the hip. My lower torso is turning towards that flexing hip, which is also yin, and my upper torso is turning in the direction of my opponent, which is yang. The next movement in grasp the sparrow's tail is push. I convert press to push simply by extending my flexed hip, which now creates my hip energy and transfers it from being yin to yang. It also reverses the yin and yang energy of my upper and lower torso. My upper torso rotation now becomes yin, turning away from the extending hip. And my lower torso energy now becomes yang, turning towards the extending hip. So I have gone from press with a flexion of my left hip, meaning pulling my knee forward, and by pushing the knee back, I change that press to push. This is only the first of the three elements of push within grasp the sparrow's tail. At this point, I'm going to now push back by reversing all three elements of the core and extending this hip while reversing my upper torso rotation to the right, or on the right side to the left, and reversing my lower torso rotation to the right. I'm going to push myself back and down by extending this hip, reaching towards that hip. So my upper torso is turning away from the extending hip, and my lower torso is turning towards it. So that is the pushing down action in grasp the sparrow's tail. I had it pushing forward. I reversed that to pushing down, and then now I'm going to reverse it again and push again off my rear hip and reverse my upper torso rotation. So this side, my left side, is now active, and the lower torso rotation is now active on the left side. When you look at this as one whole movement, you can't see any rotation going on. But in fact, what is happening is my upper torso is turning from this way to that way, counterclockwise to clockwise, and my lower torso rotation is turning from clockwise to counterclockwise. So there is a lot of twisting or torquing going on, even though it seems like my torso is flat from that transition from push down to push forward. So what we've seen now are ward off, roll back, press, and push. Those are the three elements in grasp the sparrow's tail that are listed by name, or the three techniques. There are 4 other techniques in grasp the sparrow's tail that are not shown or named explicitly. The first of those we already saw here was when I turned my upper and lower torso away from the extending hip, now making them both yin. I have an extending hip, which is yang, upper and lower torso rotation, which are yin. That is shoulder strike. So I've gone from ward off to shoulder strike, and then flex to my right hip to go from shoulder strike to roll back. From roll back, what I do is I change my lower torso rotation from the right, which is rooting my right leg, to the left, which is now rooting my left leg, and that changes roll back to split. Now, my upper torso is turning this way, and my lower torso is turning that way, counterclockwise, and my right hip is flexing. Let me show you that again. I'm going from roll back, I change my lower torso rotation, and that creates split. And then I change my upper torso rotation, meaning I change my upper torso from turning clockwise to counterclockwise, and that brings my right arm across my left hand and creates elbow strike. I'm now in a position where my right hip is flexed, my upper torso is turning counterclockwise to the left, and my lower torso is turning counterclockwise to the left. In elbow strike, the top line of the trigram is broken, which is yin, and the bottom two lines of the trigram are solid yang lines. Hip flexion, upper torso and lower torso rotation away from the flexing hip. That is elbow strike. Then I transitioned to press, push, push again, and push again. The one remaining technique in Grasp the Sparrow's Tail that I have not shown is pluck. In pluck, what I'm doing is extending the active hip and turning the upper torso towards the active hip. Pluck actually we'll see in the beginning of the Grasp the Sparrow's Tail after I step out with my right heel and I begin to shift the body forward and ward off. This is pluck. I am turning my upper torso towards the extending hip and I'm turning the lower torso away from the extending hip. That is the beginning of the ward-off action, but it's actually pluck. Ward-off does not complete until I turn the lower torso in the opposite direction, which then really expands my right arm, creating ward-off. So in Grasp the Sparrow's Tail, I step out, which actually uses press, using the flexion of this hip, and then I extend my left hip, creating pluck, and then I change the lower torso rotation, creating ward-off. Then I switch the upper and lower torso to the opposite side, creating shoulder strike, and then I flex the right hip, creating rollback. Then I change the lower torso rotation, creating split. Then I change the upper torso rotation, creating elbow strike. Then I flex my left hip and turn my left upper torso forward, creating press. Then I extend my left hip, changing that press to push. Then I reverse the push to pushing backwards. And then I reverse the push again to pushing forwards. And then we finish Grasp the Sparrow's Tail by sinking back, which now is another example of elbow strike. I flex my right hip and my upper torso and my lower torso turn to the left. Again, it appears like I'm not rotating, but that's because I have pulling energy from the flexion of the right hip, turning my body towards the right, as I have rotational energy in the torso, turning the body to the left. So it appears that I simply sit back down, even though that sitting back down is caused by rotation of the hip and the torso working against each other, presenting what appears to be a flat motion. So those are the 8 techniques of Tai Chi, correlated with the 8 core techniques of rotation of the upper torso, lower torso, and pelvis, and correlated with the yin and yang definitions of the 8 Tai Chi Trigrams.